This is the presentation that was made by Dr. Iggy Kosny and Gary Majeski of IBEW Local 353 to the International Symposium on the Challenges of Workplace Injury Prevention through Financial Incentives that was held on November 29th and 30th, 2012 in Toronto, Ontario. The purpose of this presentation was to discuss financial incentives in the electrical construction sector and the consequences on safety-related behavior and reporting and claims management practices. This was based on Gary Majeski's experience as a workers' compensation specialist at IBEW Local 353, the largest electrical union in Canada, and the study was also predicated on the findings of a recent research study on the role of coworkers after a work-related injury, sponsored by the WSIB and delivered through the Institute of Work and Health. This was a collaborative project between researchers at the Institute of Work and Health, the University of Waterloo, and IBEW Local 353. The study involved two focus groups with injured workers and union stewards. Interviews were held with electricians who had experienced working with an injured colleague who had returned to work, and there was a focus on the return-to-work experiences of injured electricians. Also investigated was the role and perceptions of coworkers in this process, in which we learned a great deal about the behavior of employers and supervisors in the early and safe return to work of an injured worker. The electrical construction sector in Ontario employs approximately 29,000 workers. In the unionized sector, it comprises the following sectors: the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, line and power, green energy, which includes wind farms and solar, utility, and residential, which includes new homes and high-rise residential condominiums. The scope of work includes the installation, construction, operation, maintenance, and repair of all electrical systems. Electrical work can take place outdoors, indoors, and on large or small work sites. The work of an electrician is physically taxing. It involves heavy lifting of materials, repetitive tasks, working in uncomfortable positions, near debris, in wet, cold, or hot conditions, and around moving vehicles. There is also positional risk in relation to live circuits, with the potential for electrocution and burns. The work is mentally taxing, and the work often requires concentration, following complex instructions, and constant communication with others. The employment environment for IBEW electricians in Ontario is unique. They don't have the concept of seniority enshrined in the collective agreement, and this has been a fact for many decades. This gives the electrical contractor the right to lay off electricians, even someone with 25-year service, before more recently hired electricians. This gives electrical contractors great flexibility, who can hire healthy workers and lay off sick, injured, or unproductive workers. Under the Employment Standards Act, construction workers are exempt from the notice and severance provisions of the ESA. IBEW Local 353 electricians are hired through a union hiring hall dispatch job referral system. Historically, 100% electricians were hired from the union hiring hall in terms of their out-of-work date. In 1998, there was a move by the Ontario provincial government to force the contractors and the union to adopt a 50-50 job referral system. This meant that one electrician was hired from the hiring hall in terms of their out-of-work date, and a second electrician would be named hire by a contractor regardless of their out-of-work date. This gave employers greater flexibility in the hiring process. Conversely, electricians had less job security. An interesting finding in the IBEW research study was the lack of penalties levied against employers in terms of WSIB experience rating when they may have been guilty and convicted of provincial safety offenses under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Driving employer behaviors in terms of the early and safe return to work process was the cost consequences of increased costs under the CAD-7 system. This was driven in large part by a desire for rebates when an employer had a clean record in terms of no lost time claims. Also problematic in this process was the Second Injury Enhancement Fund program, which provides cost relief for accident employers when there is the existence of a pre-existing condition that enhances or prolongs a work-related disability. Initially a social purpose program, but in the end, employers granted SCIF often had a detrimental impact on return to work. A major conundrum was identified in terms of the focus on due diligence and documentation reporting injuries. There was a preoccupation with documenting and the training of workers and the amount of training that was received, the hazard information that was provided to workers, and the reporting procedures that were discussed in pre-job orientation sessions. At safety meetings, they would talk about not working live at meetings. However, in reality, there was a disjuncture between the information received at meetings and the on-the-job expectations when time pressures existed. For instance, the reporting of injuries was a mantra that was cited often, that report everything. Yet the reality was internal reporting and reporting to the WSIB was discouraged. A frequent theme in the various focus groups was that internal reporting and safety meetings often seem like an accounting exercise and not so much about protecting the worker's health. One focus group participant, Darren, had the following to say: I ended up cutting my hand on a stud when, I think, it was like second-year apprentice. So I went to my foreman. He started laughing at me. Come on, you're a big baby. And I am like, I am not a big baby. You told me I have to report all accidents, so I am doing what I'm supposed to do. Are you going to fill out the report, or are you not going to fill out the report? Oh, you're a big baby. So I'm left there. What do I do? One of the key findings of the IBEW study was very early return to work was driven by a desire to avoid a lost time claim. Where there was a visible witnessed injury, it was easier to get a worker back to work immediately rather than to suppress a workers' compensation claim. Internal claim management practices were viewed as normal and a good business practice by employers. Good for the business, kept costs low, kept everybody employed. Good for the worker, kept worker engaged socially. The experience is that in the unionized electrical construction sector in Ontario, there is little meaningful, modified, and sustainable work for electricians. Some electricians who were still considerably injured when they returned to work came straight from a hospital. There was also the dynamic of an increased workload for the uninjured co-workers. Replacement workers could be added, but this was avoided because of increased predetermined project costs. Oftentimes, injured workers drifted into regular duties quickly and quietly, or an injured worker was sent to the office or put in a room by themselves. Social isolation and return to work with unfamiliar co-workers was a problem. Doing nothing, or less than full duties, led to resentment from others. In one focus group, James said, I know it really burned a lot of people. I mean, just knowing that he is sitting there doing nothing for 8 hours, and you got to pick up that slack, that's a problem. And another focus group participant said, you hate like hell going into work because your coworker is going to give you a rough time because, oh well, you got a cushy job, oh it's cold out, oh it's muddy out, so you got a cushy job. You're going to hear stuff like that all the time. And that is the perception of injured workers who have to deal with their coworkers and the typical stuff that they encounter. In the unionized electrical construction industry, injured workers are viewed as a liability that hurt the bottom line, the company, and everyone else's job security. As Larry, one focus group participant, stated, the success of the company is directly related to their success, and everybody knows that. So there's a fear that the company will suffer from a workplace injury. And this affects how injured workers are treated in the workplace. There is resentment, and oftentimes they are ridiculed. More importantly, under the employment environment, it's easy to get rid of injured workers. because unionized electricians have no job security, an employer can claim a shortage of work with 1 hour's notice. Moreover, contractors have the ability to name hire in this environment. In the end, injured workers lose out. Financial incentives and penalties for safety behavior of an employer could shift the view of injured workers in a more positive light. Any new financial incentives system that is introduced needs to consider how behaviors are driven by the experience rating system that affect social relations, including the relationship with coworkers. Also, the consequences of financial incentives will be shaped by the industry and workplace characteristics, because the IBEW in Ontario has a unique environment where there's no job security or seniority, which makes it easier for contractors or employers to get rid of costly injured workers. The 50-50 job referral system makes it easier to not rehire workers who have pursued a workers' compensation claim. Going forward in the future, these are issues that need to be addressed by the Ontario government and the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board of Ontario.